What's up, everybody? Nico Dwyer back with you for another episode of the 10th inning with another edition of This Day in Sports History. Now, yesterday in sports history, we saw the legendary start to what would be Michael Jordan's career when he was awarded the NBA Rookie of the Year. In today's episode, we have another historic milestone for a Hall of Fame player in another sport, though, and this is at the end of his career, not the beginning of his career. But before we get into that, if you all enjoy this video, leave a like down on it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. More content like this will be coming each and every day. Now let's get into it. This day in sports history. To start off, in 1875, we have the first edition of the Kentucky Derby. Now, the Kentucky Derby is the most famous horse race in America. It's the first race of the Triple Crown. You have the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont. And the Kentucky Derby starts it all off. That's where you know who has the chance to become a Triple Crown winner. And in 1875, Aristides with jockey Oliver Lewis became the first champion of the race. Now, the race was a little bit different back then. It was 1.5 miles instead of 1.25 miles like it was today. Some things change, some things don't. The things that don't, 15 horses were in that inaugural race, and the owner of Aristides actually had another horse in the race, and Aristides was really used as a rabbit, but he ended up winning the first Kentucky Derby. Moving up to 1950, you have the Chicago Cubs going against the Brooklyn Robins, and George Zabel, otherwise known as Zip Zabel, threw the longest relief appearance in MLB history at 18 1/3 innings. In a 19-inning game, the starting pitcher for the Cubs only went 2/3 of an inning, therefore Zabel came in, picked up the slack, threw 18 1/3 innings to finish out the game. The Cubs ended up winning 4-3, and Zabel 18 1/3 innings, 9 hits allowed, 2 runs, 1 walk, and 6 strikeouts. Now, if that's not impressive enough, we have to look at the Brooklyn Robins pitcher too, Jeff Pfeffer. Pfeffer went 18 2/3, allowing 13 hits, 4 runs, on 8 walks, and 6 strikeouts. So you have the longest relief appearance in MLB history, but you also have 2 pitchers going 2 full game lengths pitching. It's just crazy. Sticking with baseball, in 1939, you have the first televised baseball game, which was broadcast on NBC, of Princeton versus Columbia. Princeton defeated Columbia 2-1. 1 camera was used in this experiment game. Remember, this was the time of the radio. TV wasn't even a thought at this point. This was an experiment game. Later on in that summer, the MLB would televise its first Major League Baseball game, but this was the first televised baseball game. Moving into 1963, we're sticking with baseball here. The Houston Colt 45s are going against the Philadelphia Phillies. The 45s pitcher, Don Notabart, tosses the first no-hitter in the 45s/Astros franchise history as the 45s defeat the Phillies 4-1. Well, you're thinking, 4-1? He still gave up a run in a no-hitter? He must have been very wild that whole game. Not exactly. Notabart, 9 innings pitched, 0 hits, 1 run allowed, 3 walks with 8 strikeouts. So 3 walks, not too crazy. But how the Phillies scored their run. In the top of the 5th inning, their first batter reached on an error. He got to second. Then a ground ball the next at bat. And then with 1 out, man on third, the Phillies were able to drive him in without getting a hit. So Notabart wasn't even wild that game. But the Phillies still managed to get a run. However, the 45s still won the game 4-1. Notabart tosses the first no-hitter in Astros history. In 1964, the first Tim Hortons donut shop opens. It was opened by former NHL player Tim Horton. Tim Hortons is one of the most famously known donut shops/coffee shops in Canada, and for good reason. They have some excellent food up there. And if you've never tried it, I don't know what to tell you. When I went up there, I tried it. It was amazing. And in 1964, in Hamilton, the first Tim Hortons opened. Moving up to 1970, we have Hank Aaron becoming the 9th MLB player in history to achieve 3,000 hits. Now, Hank Aaron, he became the 9th player to get 3,000 hits, but he also did something a little bit different. He also became the first player to have 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. Willie Mays would soon join him in that club. But in 1970, when this went down, it was a doubleheader against the Reds that day. At the start of the second game, Hank Aaron got an infield single to get his 3,000th hit, making him the first member of the 3,500 club. And you should say this is exactly how it was drawn up that Hank Aaron would get his 3,000th hit. It wasn't flashy, anything like that, much like his career, but it was consistent. He got the job done, and that's what Aaron had done his whole career. And if you want to read more about that, there will be a link down in the description. Moving up to 1974, you have the 18th European Cup, where Bayern Munich defeated Atletico Madrid 4-0. However, this was not the first time these two met that same year in the final. 2 days earlier, they played their first game, and going into extra time, the game was tied 0-0. But the game ended as a 1-1 draw. Therefore, they replayed the match. Bayern Munich ended up winning 4-0 in that replayed match. In 1979, you have the second highest scoring game in MLB history. If it wasn't spoiled that this was an MLB game, you might have no idea what sport I'm talking about. The Philadelphia Phillies defeated the Chicago Cubs 23-22 in that game. Overall, there were 50 hits and 11 home runs, plus the game went to extra innings. In the 10th inning, the Phillies scored a run, the run that finally proved to be enough. And a really interesting thing I think about this game, the starters for both teams both only got one out. Pitchers galore were used this game. 45 combined runs, 50 hits, 11 home runs, the second highest scoring game in MLB history. If you like scoring, that's the game to go watch. In 1993, the Stanley Cup Final, the New York Islanders are looking for their fourth consecutive title. Will they get it? Well, yes, they will. They swept the Edmonton Oilers in 4 games after a 4-2 victory in Game 4, giving them their fourth consecutive title, one of the best dynasties of the 80s. In 1992, the LPGA Championship, Betsy Kane wins her 5th major title, 11 strokes ahead of the runner-up. It's fair to say she flat out dominated in that tournament. Then in 1998, another LPGA Championship, 20-year-old rookie Se-Ri Pak wins the first of her 5 majors, 3 strokes ahead of the runner-ups. Moving to 1998, the New York Yankees are facing the Minnesota Twins, and David Wells tosses his first perfect game. And this was the 13th perfect game out of 23 overall perfect games in MLB history. 2 pre-1900 perfect games and 21 in the modern era. David Wells, 9 innings pitched, 0 runs, 0 hits, all of that stuff, 0 walks, and 11 strikeouts on the day. In 2003, the FA Cup title was between Arsenal and Southampton. Arsenal ended up winning 1-0 off of a 38th minute game-winning goal for Arsenal's 9th title. Then in 2006, you have the 14th UEFA Champions League final, which pitted Barcelona against Arsenal, and Barcelona ended up defeating Arsenal 2-1 to gain that championship. Sticking with soccer in 2008, the FA Cup final was between Portsmouth and Cardiff City. Portsmouth ended up defeating Cardiff City 1-0. And in 2014, another FA Cup final. You have Arsenal beats Hull City 3-2, with Aaron Ramsey scoring the game-winning goal in the 109th minute. Now going to maybe one of the worst things that had ever happened in sports in general at the higher level. In 2018, Michigan State University pays $500 million in claims to 300 survivors of sexual abuse involving Larry Nassar. This was the largest sexual abuse case in sports history. But we ended on a good note. In 2019, Brooks Koepka, a name we mentioned yesterday, Brooks Koepka fires a 65, 5-under to set a new 36-hole record at a major championship. And after 2 rounds, Koepka also had a 7-stroke lead on his way to win the title. But we'll mention that more in the next 2 days. So there you have it. That's what happened on this day in sports history. Did I leave something out? Let me know down in the comments section. For Nick O'Dwyer and the 10th inning, stay safe out there. See ya.